Hi, I'm Dave Musser, and once again, we're on here to do the Authors Roundtable. I appreciate everybody being online today. I'm going to do a brief introduction of everybody so that we can get to know our players for today's show. First, we have Casie, and it's Aufenthie. Did I get that right?
Aufenthie.
Aufenthie. I had it phonetically there. Sorry about that. Aufenthie. There we go.
Yep.
Perfect. So Casie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I write new adult sci-fi fantasy, and it's usually got a heavy dose of romance in there. My debut novel, The Drift, came out in March of 2021, and I'm currently working on its sequel, The Symbiosis, which should be out later this year.
Excellent. And John St. Clair's on here as well.
Hey, welcome. And thanks for everybody for being here, and especially the folks that I invited. Very excited about that. So my name is John St. Clair. I live in Reston, Virginia, and I am lucky to be a full-time writer. And I published my debut novel, Stalin's Door, in March of 2021. And I met, after I did that, I met a whole lot of really fabulous people in the Twitter writing community. And so I really, over the last, coming up on a year, really enjoyed meeting them and learning so much about marketing that I didn't have any clue about when I hit that publish button, but I know a lot more now. And I write all sorts of things. I'm writing for anthologies and I write short stories, and I am working on a second novel, which has nothing to do with the first one that I did. And it's a slow progression, but I'm getting there, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Excellent. And London Blue's on the line today.
Hey guys, London Blue, and let's see, I published my first horror book, Mass Mayhem Maladies, August 2021. Met up with David on Facebook, and we co-wrote The Last Call together, and that was published, David, September of 2021. Since then, during that last year, I'm a new grandma. I had a grandbaby. So towards the end of 2021, I've been working on a children's book, which we'll probably get into that a little bit later on. But instead of self-publishing it, I'm actually sending that one off to publishing houses. Hopefully somebody will pick it up. I'm also working on kind of jumping genres from the adult horror to middle grade horror, and I'm currently finishing up my first in that, which is called The Tabar. And in addition, I've got two more in the works. So my goal, and luckily for me, I get to be a full-time writer as well. So my goal for 2022 is to get Baby Jen, The Tabar, and two more published by the end of the year. So
nice. And then Rochelle Raeta.
That's it. Hi, I'm Rochelle. I write new adult magical realism with a heavy dose of romance. I won't call it paranormal romance because some of them do end up on the sad spectrum. Not always a happily ever after guaranteed. I wrote my debut last year in 2021. Its birthday is actually coming up March 26th. And then within a week on April 1st, I have my second coming out called Ladybirds. So I'm
awesome.
Great.
An anthology. I have a short story in an anthology coming out on March 31st. So it's going to be a very, very busy spring for me.
That is awesome. And then finally today we have Crystal Thomas with us.
Hi there. I go by Kay Thomas. If you're looking for my books, my debut was released on February 14th of last year, and the second in the series came out in October. It is borderline paranormal romance, slow burn, new adult, but PG-13. So, a little bit of strong language, adult themes, not a lot of nudity. There is an intimate scene in the second book, but this is not a high flame romance. It is slow burn. It is targeted towards upper teens, lower 20s, character driven plots. So third book will be coming out later this year. And mostly I'm just dealing with the marketing stuff and beta reading for Rochelle's stuff, which is very exciting that it's coming out.
That is awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody being on here, like I said, and my main goal for these is to help get information out. One of the things I heard several of you mention was marketing. So John, you said you learned a lot about marketing. For me, it was the same way. It was like, okay, I've published this book now. Where are the readers? What's happening?
Yep.
And I didn't realize how many of my family members couldn't read, but
Right?
I mean, I've got like 300 cousins, and I haven't sold 300 books yet, even the free ones. So I don't know. But with that said, just
That's good.
Everybody shout out things you've thought of, or go into deep discussions on marketing would be a great thing to start helping people with.
Well, this is John. I will say, if you're listening to this and you haven't published your first novel or your first story or whatever you want to sell, start working on it now. Don't wait until you hit publish to say, hey, now what do I do? It doesn't mean that there's any wrong way of doing it. It just means that you're going to have to do that work regardless. And you can start sooner rather than later. And if you start sooner, then you can have things like verified purchases and reviews lined up on the day that you publish, which is a huge leg up on everyone else that won't have anything. Some people, for better or worse, won't take a chance on a novel if there aren't any reviews, even if there aren't any bad reviews. If there are no reviews, they might just say, hey, we'll skip on to the next one that has 500. Now, getting 500 would be great, but having a couple dozen in there on day one or maybe in the first week would be a huge positive. So if you can get those beta readers to turn into ARC readers that can turn into verified purchases and have those reviews lined up on day one or within the first week, you will be light years ahead of where most people that publish themselves are. Certainly where I was.
Yeah, that's what I hear you. The problem for me is trusting those beta readers, and then also getting that list of people, right? So do you maintain like an email list and things like that? Is that what everybody's doing now, or what's the best way to get those people? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it Book Talk? What's working for people?
So I'm going through this right now. I just did my round of beta readers. So I had 4 beta readers. They were all people that I met in the writing community that I trusted. John is one and Chris is another.
Yep.
All people that I trusted, obviously, and I trusted their opinion on the matter. I wanted to make sure that they were people that had read my first book and kind of understood the direction and were in line with the kind of direction that I wanted to go in. So I'm about to do ARCs. I am setting it up so that my ARCs go first to my mailing list that I am creating by putting back matter in the back of my debut. Sorry, my camera's shaking because my cat's rubbing up against the camera. So by curating it over the past 6 months by putting an additional page of back matter in my debut novel saying, okay, if you want a sneak peek of my next book, sign up to my mailing list. That way I know that ARC readers are people that are legitimately interested in my next book.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Can you explain to everybody what the difference is between a beta reader and an ARC reader?
Absolutely. So my understanding, and this is the first time I'm doing it because my first one I went in head first, no idea what I was doing.
Right.
So the difference, my understanding is for a beta reader, I am giving you the book. I am asking you for your feedback. If you see something that's not jiving, I want you to tell me that it's not jiving. If you see something that doesn't make sense, it is your responsibility as a beta reader to bring that to my attention. Whereas for an ARC read, our ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy. So those ARC copies are for the readers. They are supposed to be basically just a way of getting those early reviews. That way I have something on that Amazon listing and on those Goodreads listings once the book is released.
Nice.
So how do you get those ARC readers? Is that where you do preliminary sales or?
No, so I'm going through a company called Booksprout. So they handle it. It's all ebooks. So I hand them Booksprout the ebook files, and then they give me a private link. You can do it either private or public. I'm choosing to do private so I can do it to my mailing list. So they give me a private link. That way I can give that link to my mailing list. If they wish to download it, they can download it. And then Booksprout will actually send them reminders of when they should be submitting their reviews. And we're supposed to be submitting their reviews too. So I have it set up where I want you to do a review for Goodreads and a review for Amazon. And they do all the work for sending out the reminder emails. So I think they do a week before, like, oh, hey, it's coming up. And then the day of, okay, it's time to put your review in. If you missed it, hey, you forgot.
That's good.
Nice. Great
I
information.
hadn't heard of that service. So excellent. So what else works? What works for you, Casie?
I got kind of lucky. I made some
That's better than
connections on Twitter. They had read the first book and they just connected with it in such a way that they reached out to me and said, hey, when you're ready for the next one, please let me know. I want to do it. I'm really passionate about the story. And as an author, that's exactly what you want to hear when you're wanting feedback, because I want someone who cares about the story almost as much as I do when they're going to be having that rough version of it.
Yes.
Because I do want to do it justice and I don't want to let the readers down and I don't want to let the characters down. So like I said, I kind of got lucky. So those that reached out to me, I'm like, you know what? They're passionate about this. They're people that I've had a lot of conversations with about the story. And so I decided that I was going to trust them this time. And so it's in their hands as we speak.
That's awesome, actually.
That's
amazing.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And then Crystal, how about you? I think it sounded like you perked up when she mentioned Booksprout. So it sounds like you're on that as well.
I have not used them, but I did research a lot of that to try to decide if I would for ARC copies. I chose to avoid the ARC route with my books just because I didn't really need to. I just gave away copies when they released. So I might do it for the third one, but the very first book, getting alpha, beta readers, right? So like your alpha readers are your true trust circle, right? Where you're talking about, like, they're going to see the version no one else gets to see the light of day with, right? The version that has all the embarrassing stuff in it that you're still trying to decide whether or not it's okay or you should never have typed it. You have those individuals, and then you have your beta readers that get to see the mostly polished version that you're trying to make sure you didn't miss some consistency with. And I had a lot of luck because I did have a good circle of friends that were, writers or within that general industry that could give me some feedback. I had some very close friends. I leaned more, oddly enough, towards males reading my books, which, I've got a few podcast conversations coming up to explain some of the things in my books, because my initial reader pool always, for some reason, tends to lean towards male readers, even though it's romance, which is kind of strange, and it kind of hits differently. Yeah. I know, but it was an unexpected thing when I started writing my books. Right, those were not the people I thought were going to raise their hand and be like, me first, right? So it was a bit of a surprise, a good surprise, a great surprise, but it does mean that I had to broaden the people that actually I used for that pool as I got to the second book, because I did have a pretty good mixture of individuals, and I targeted people that were the age range of the characters in the book as well, because obviously I am not. And so I needed someone who was a little bit closer to the dialogue and the slang and how people dress than me, so that I wasn't saying something that they're like, that's cute in 1999. So there was a big mixture of that was really important, and I think is very important for new readers or new writers, right? When you're trying to target an audience that is not your current age group, or if you're trying to write from a location that you don't know very well, it's very important to get readers in those early stages of your manuscript that can help you with those finer details that will help it kind of pull off a little bit. You do not have to write your book so that you can't understand what your characters are saying, but avoiding specific phrases that they would never use within that subset, or occasionally tossing in a word that they would, it helps a lot. And so that's a big key thing to those beta readers, is just making sure that you don't think you're targeting something that you are not targeting. not your intention. So but yeah, again, close individuals, not super close, not your sister, because you're gonna get mad when the sibling tells you something and you're not going to believe them. Not your best friend. Your best friend can read it, but just know they're not going to catch everything. Go a couple rings out. I went to, family that was removed, right, that I knew I could trust and that would give feedback. I went to individuals that I knew well enough, but that were not best friends and who weren't afraid to tell me that was weird. And that was kind of the big key, was that you want a balance of people that are going to lift up your emotional side, and a balance of people who are going to actually tell you that was the dumbest thing they've ever read. You need both.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. And the book that I was telling you about, the middle grade horror book that I'm writing, obviously it's middle grade, so there's no gore or cussing or anything like that. But I actually ran the first half of the book by a 12 and 13 year old boys, and let them read it. And I got excited because they got excited, come running down the steps hollering, I want to go out, and because I was outside, and they told their mom, I got to go out and talk to Tammy, or my name's Tammy, my real name. I got to go out and talk to Tammy. I've got to tell her about those cool things you can put in here. Or so they were able to connect with it. And my teenage daughter, I'll ask her about the name brands, and they're like, Mom, nobody wears Keds. We wear Vans or whatever, that kind of thing. So I agree completely. You've got to know your audience, and you've got to interact with your audience, let them read it, so that you're more in tune with your target.
Yeah, for me, it was funny. I needed to do some research, and I knew somebody had a lot of medical knowledge. So I'm sending him a link on Facebook going, okay, how do you treat a sucking chest wound? And he's like, do you really need to know this now? Or he's like, is something going on? And I'm like, no, I'm just writing it into a book. I'm like, somebody needs to know. I'm like, I heard something years ago about, you used a plastic bag or something. But it was funny. And as part of it, he started telling his family members and stuff like that. And next thing I know, I'm getting feedback from them going, oh, loved your first book and all that. So, you never know where different people are going to discover your work. And, I try to push as much out there as I can. I even, on the last podcast we had, somebody mentioned business cards. And
that was me.
Before. Yeah, you mentioned those. So I created business cards.
Definitely got them right here.
So I hand those out to everybody. Yeah.
Anybody. You can go out to dinner, put it with your bill. You never know who's going to pick this up and put an order in. I give them out wherever I go.
Yep.
So, yep.
I've been passing. Yeah,
I actually took that tip too and had some made up, and I handed a couple out at Lowe's when I was out there picking out paint for my new office, which clearly I'm not in yet, or I wouldn't be pink. But because of all the red walls and tablecloth in here. But went to Lowe's to pick out some new paint for my new office, and sold 2 books to the guy who was mixing my paint, and handed out a couple extra business cards. So that does work.
It's a little old school, but it does work. Trust me.
It does.
That's awesome. Now, what about book signings and stuff? So I know with COVID, a lot of things were shut down. I know things are opening up more. Do y'all like to do book signings?
I think someone's got someone tomorrow, Chris. Is that right?
And I swear nobody told me, if anybody listening, they didn't tell me.
Ask me after tomorrow. Because obviously with COVID, we couldn't, you couldn't do any of that kind of stuff, right? Like you didn't get to have a launch party. You didn't get to do any of the fun things. It was all the anxiety and, oh my gosh, is someone actually going to read? People are going to have copies of my typos everywhere. So yeah, tomorrow will be my very first book signing. So
that's awesome.
Congrats.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm very excited. It's the day before the book anniversary or book birthday, however you want to say it, for the first book. So it's really well timed. It's of course Super Bowl Sunday, but that's fine. And so that's a big thing for probably new writers, right? Is, how do you want to get your book out? Do you want to do public events? Do you care if local bookstores carry your book, or do you just want the most number of readers possible, right? Because what matters the most to you for all of those things will depend on how you decide to distribute that book what method you decide to do. If you go straight, Amazon only, Amazon Kindle Unlimited, you're rarely picked up by local indie bookstores because obviously that's their major competitor. So if that's the only way that you can print your book, they're most likely not going to pick you up. And it does limit your ability to do those things like the signings and some of the book events. But you get access to, the largest platform for ebooks right now. So it's not like you're missing out on potential sales. You're just missing out on events. If you're an introvert, it's maybe not that big of a deal. I'm a big introvert, so this is actually a huge thing for me to do this. And I was forced to reach out to bookstores and say, hey, my book is available and you can order my book, and I'm local. And I lucked out to have a really large local chain that's kind of locally, it's the baby. We all love Tattered Cover. It is the bookstore for Colorado. And they happen to have an author program. So they make it real sweet and kind to their authors. They're just like, we already have the program. Just email here. We're expecting it. You're not cold calling us. They make it really, really easy on you, which is nice because otherwise it's very uncomfortable. But you do have to put yourself out there for that. And then you have other options, right? Like you can use Ingram to format your book so that you can then be distributed more widely. And if you want to get into those indie bookstores and have some of those opportunities, it gives you the chance to say, no, I'm available here, so that they will pick you up and they don't see you as just an Amazon product, right? So those are really important decisions you have to make as an author starting out. Or you can do it my way and just like throw stuff out there and then realize after the fact what it all means. But it's easier. It's easier if you know a little bit about it beforehand.
Well, exactly. In fact, I started looking at different bookstores about carrying it, and that's when I found out, oh, you're on Amazon. Sorry. Yeah. And I'm going, okay. So now I have to figure out, okay, do I want to be on, Kindle Unlimited? Do I want it in the Select or whatever, or I have to go through them, or do I want to get out of it and do it? I don't know yet. So it's definitely interesting.
Actually, see, I'm kind of the opposite. I haven't had as many online sales through Amazon as I have on in-person signings. Actually, last year during the COVID was, I guess, maybe because there weren't as many book signings going on, there weren't as many book launch parties. Maybe that's why I was a little more successful. I'm not sure, but I was also willing to travel. Like tomorrow, I have a mini book signing here locally during Super Bowl. And unfortunately, I will actually be competing with the Super Bowl because I'll literally be sitting under the TV of the broadcast. So that's why
that could work for you.
It's going to be an all-night thing. Honestly, I'm almost out of books anyway, so I'll come for maybe an hour or so. I'll set up at 6, I'll stay for an hour, and then I'm out. But I've done, because I do horror, I've done book signings at several haunted houses. I've grouped up with other horror writers. We did a big group signing at a haunted house. I've been to 2 other haunted houses on my own with that. Outside of my area, I have teamed up with a new company, a ghost tour company that has just formed last year. I teamed up with her, and on one of her opening nights, on her walk, she had me set up in one of the local businesses that they pass by. So I was a stopping point on her tour. Teamed up with a country rock band and traveled down to, oh my gosh, was it North Carolina, and they promoted me during their gig, their concert, and I was set up during their concert. I've traveled down to South Carolina and did some book signings down there.
Nice.
So yeah, I've been extremely active, and I enjoy going out and meeting people and talking to people. And I think that they get extremely excited when they get to meet you in person. I mean, I sold 4 books at one hotel to just the staff, because when I was checking in, they're like, oh, well, what do you do? Just chit chat. And I'm like, well, I'm a horror writer. They're like, you're what? Really? Do you have any books? Can we get them? And I'm like, I'm signing autographs. They're at the check-in counter at a hotel. I've learned that if you just talk to people and tell them what you do, usually they'll come to you and ask you for the books. So I've actually sold more in person than I have online. which is
Well, I think we've identified which one of us is the extrovert.
Yeah. That is, yes.
Just a little.
well, my purple hair might throw that off too.
Not my way.
All right. So what else are we doing for marketing? So we've got those things. I tried like one of those services where it's, hey, we'll put you out there on all of our book things and all this stuff. And I didn't get a thing. And I specifically didn't. I've got 3 novellas out now by myself, and then a 4th one out with London. And so I specifically did not target that book in anything else I was doing, just to see if I was getting anything from them. And I got nothing. So I'm like going, okay, maybe that wasn't the best service. Maybe there's some better ones out there. Amazon ads maybe, or Facebook ads. Any luck on any of those from anyone?
John, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, I can jump in. I've done everything you just said, minus the hiring a third party to market my stuff. I did the Amazon ads for a while at the very beginning, but what I quickly realized through their discussion groups and just discovering on my own is they will work, but they have a model which is strange, which is sort of a bid ask system where you put a range, a targeted range, a physical dollar amount that you're willing to pay for a click. And if some other person that is doing Amazon ads at the same time bids more, they put each author up against themselves, and you could actually end up spending more or go outside of your budget very quickly because it's a pay for click system that can exceed your budgeted amount. Facebook, on the other hand, has a ceiling. Say you want to spend $40 over 10 days. They will arrange it in such a way that you will never go over budget, and you will spend exactly $40, and you will get clicks and you'll get page views, but you won't find yourself out of budget ever.
Wow.
And as we discussed, David, on the first one we did this fall, Facebook ads worked really well in the spring and into the early summer of 2021. But as you probably know, or if you don't know, they changed, Apple changed their privacy settings such that you can opt out of a lot of advertising that directly hit Facebook users. And with their new operating system, I think it was iOS 14.5, and especially in Europe, you can opt out of a lot of the advertising. You won't be physically served ads on Facebook because of Apple's privacy settings.
Wow.
That is a huge blow, because if you have a very lucrative targeted advertising, it won't be showing up anymore for people that opt out. That's great for folks that don't want to see ads, but it's bad for folks that depend on ads and have paid for ads to sell books or sell anything for that matter. There's lots of advertising everywhere on Facebook. For me personally, it has worked, but it's not worked as well as it did in the spring and summer. I run them occasionally now, maybe 1 or 2 times a month with a very limited budget, something like $5 a day. And I'm still selling books via this method, but it's not like the old days. And if I was here in 2019, 2020, early 2021, I probably would have sold 10 times as many, but they have really changed it, at least on Facebook, such that it doesn't work like it used to. It's very, very limiting. And it's a shame, because Facebook has the ability, you can target down to keywords, interests, age ranges, demographics, where people live, what their interests are. I mean, you can hone in really, really quickly on what you think they're going to read, and it did prove very lucrative early on, but it's not as good as it was. At best, I'm breaking even. At worst, it's not paying for itself. So Amazon ads, I really didn't go back to. I tried it for a little while, but a couple times I did it, I was out of budget on day one, and that's just not something you can sustain very quickly. And I would love to hear if there are other ways to engage on social media. I will say that engaging on Twitter probably, if I had the hard numbers in front of me, probably has been more lucrative than anything else. The way that Twitter works, especially in the writing community, you can interact and target and get your book out in front of other readers and authors much more efficiently than anything else that I'm aware of. Now, again, I don't do TikTok. I have seen some positive results, especially from a few people on this call. And I would love to hear how that is going, because I think of anything that's out there, that is likely the most lucrative at the moment.
Interesting. Okay.
Can I ask, John, you mentioned that you think that Twitter is, for you, has been the best platform to get your book
Yes.
out.
Mhm.
How do you go about doing that? How do you go about getting followers, or how do you?
For me, it's totally organic. And I will say I've not paid for any advertising on Twitter. I know they have it, but I haven't used it. I haven't needed to. And maybe I have more time than anyone else. I probably do. Just interacting with people is very lucrative. If you develop any type of following, if they follow you or you do any type of interaction, it's not going to take very long for them to start clicking on stuff that's in your bio. And it's like, oh, okay, this guy's a writer. Oh, what did he write? Oh, let me go check that book out. Oh, wow, it's got a lot of good reviews. Let me go see, what this is all about. All of that I have done on Twitter has been totally organic. And I had almost 0 followers when I launched my book. And I think I've crossed over 6,000 sometime last week.
Wow, that's great.
I haven't done anything other than just interacting with people and using hashtags. And if they are authors, reading their stuff will likely get them to read your stuff as well. So there's sort of that interaction. Everyone on this call that I invited, I've read their work and they've read mine. So I think that's wonderful, especially for author to author type of interactions. Like I said, I've been very lucky. I haven't had to pay for anything on Twitter, but to answer your question, getting followers, just interacting with people will do that. If you like someone's post, if you give them a comment, if they ask a question and you answer it, or they do something else, you're going to get that type of followership pretty quickly, I think. And these are real people. I hadn't met anyone on this call, this time last year that didn't know any of you.
Exactly.
So I know all of you now, and I think that's wonderful. So
when I was trying to think, John, if you and I had met on Twitter or Facebook, I can't remember because I've got you on both. So
yeah. And you never know. You start following someone, and this is my dream. It hasn't happened yet, but you start following someone, and it's going to happen. They happen to be in a book club, and their next book is going to be selected, and they happen to be in one of these mega book clubs that has 500 people, and suddenly you're going to look at your Amazon dashboard and you'll have 100 orders in one day because you were nice to somebody on Twitter and they picked up your book on their book club, and now suddenly you sold 100 books for doing nothing other than just being a nice person. So
great tip.
That's going to happen for me. I've seen it happen with other people. It's going to happen one day, but you never know who's going to buy your book. And that's why I try to be nice to everyone, because you just never know where that's going to lead. So plus it's the right thing to do anyway, but
right.
I would say I'm actually kind of on the same boat as John. I didn't have any idea how to market. I had no following on Twitter whatsoever when I launched my book. I think I maybe knew like 3 people. And what got going for me was I saw these groups starting to do like these prompts for snippets from your book. And so I started putting out little snippets of my book, and people were like, oh, you actually write decently. I'm going to try this. And word started getting out. And that's actually, I think, where I made most of my sales was off of Twitter, from people reading these little snapshots of my story and going, hey, this might be something I like.
Nice.
That's excellent.
And then I have played around TikTok, but not super successfully. I think maybe Rochelle is the expert there.
So TikTok, I'm new on TikTok. I've only been doing it, I think, since December, but I am finding that based off of what you write, TikTok can be a wonderful tool social media wise, because I was definitely a lot of sales, majority of my sales were definitely coming from Twitter, because my marketing strategy is non-existent. So before that, most of them was coming from Twitter, but certain genres just really work in the TikTok community. Because I write new adult, most of my audience is going to be on, most of my target audience is going to be on TikTok, because it's just an app that a lot of the younger community is on. So I've definitely seen an increase in sales and an increase in readers since joining. since starting to do the whole TikTok thing.
And she's hilarious, in case anyone
I'm
wants
going to have to follow her.
endorsement.
Really hard.
Oh my.
I like dragged her kicking and screaming to TikTok. I'm like, you have to come with me. I can't go alone. And now I'm like, I just log in to see your videos. I don't even know why I'm here.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
great. It's great.
You see, most of the stuff I do on computers, I've got a lot of computers around, as you can see. And so for me, it's like, you mean I have to do something just on my phone? That's kind of
my.
annoying. Yeah.
It's weird on TikTok, I will say. It's for social media platforms, one thing I will give TikTok, at least in the corner that I have landed in, right, which is the younger crowd that's on there, they're very kind. There is a lot less bullying and a lot less just aggressive, inappropriate behavior than you might get in some of the other platforms, because, John, I was going to joke and be like, well, if you really want to market your book, make a friend like John, because John shares everything. He tells you everything. I did Facebook ads because I had heard horrible things about them. He's like, no, I'll give it a try, try a couple of things. And I just experimented a little bit. I was afraid to experiment, right? Because the idea of, I'm going to be pushing it to people as opposed to them finding me and I know they want to be here is a very different thing.
Yep.
But I just went for it, right? And I'll say, like, boosting posts. So anyone who is, like, if you do have a Facebook account, you have advertisements and you have boosts to a post. So you can make a Facebook post and you can boost that.
That's what I do all the time.
Or you can have a true advertisement, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
So I actually experienced a really negative backlash to me boosting posts. I had a lot of men coming on to my tweet or on my Facebook posts and cussing me out because they were very angry that my post ended up on their feed. Now, keep in mind, as John stated, Facebook targets, and it targets well. So they were angry, but it ended up there for a reason.
For a reason, exactly.
Just saying. So I actually have not found a lot of success boosting posts unless I'm very careful about where it boosts to. But I find a lot of success with advertising. So if I do a true advertisement, that's worked very well. I do a $3 a day. I real light coffee a day type, a couple coffees a day type advertising. And the funny thing is I sell physical copies of my books, not e-copies of my books. So my sales of my physical copies tripled doing that. And I get a lot of people going to Barnes and Noble and Apple as opposed to Amazon. So it's a different group, right, that you get for that. I have done a lot of advertising because I cannot disclose my day job, but I will say that I am in business. And so it's kind of interesting to me and I find it very fun. And so I've tried a lot of different things. Fussy Librarian is a newsletter that's very cheap. It's not expensive at all. And if you discount your books, if you discount them to like 99 cents or any kind of large discount, they have rules. If you go to their website, they have been phenomenally successful every time I've done an event on my books. So when I released my second book, I obviously went back to them because I had used them for the first one. I was trying to figure out how I even get it out there. And I had used them when my book was free during, it originally was in Kindle Unlimited for a while. And so they allowed me to do a free giveaway, like those 5 days of free. And I was able to do that. And I had thousands of downloads. Wow. And so it was very lucrative it was not a very expensive newsletter. I think it was maybe $35 at the time. It was nothing. It was nothing to get my book out there. And I had zero social media at that point, right? Like it was on the list of, like, I hadn't even set up a Twitter account. I was really like, my story is my husband actually published my first book as an anniversary gift.
Nice.
I actually didn't expect anyone to ever read it. It was like him being like, here's your book. Look how great.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then he was like, oh, I'm going to try a couple things, just see what happens. And it kind of, I was like, holy crap. That's a lot of people downloading my book.
Yeah.
I guess I need to have like a social media. So in case one of them wants to come back and find me. And that's really how I ended up down this rabbit hole of actually, taking it seriously. And so I've tried that. I've tried, newsletters. I did in December. I tried I think it's K-Books promo. Right as Amazon had a crash and pulled my books down. So that was cool. But they're very expensive. And I thought, I want to see if this works, right? Like I have the means to try this. I don't want somebody who, this would be a huge scrape to do to do it and not have a good experience. And so I'm like, I'm going to give these people a shot. I'm going to see how this goes. I've had my release. I know what my release looks like. Let's see how this goes. And not only it went really, really well. I had hundreds of downloads from it, and I mean, hundreds, 400 something downloads from it, and people who left reviews. And they actually, when Amazon took my book down, because Amazon was having a problem and took a whole bunch of individuals' books down for no reason, gave no information about it. And I was able to, luckily, because I'm widely distributed, which means I'm in all the different platforms, I was able to kind of refer people to other platforms, and it was okay, but not great. But they actually paused my advertisement and extended my advertisement. And redid it and relaunched it for me because of this happening. So they were actually really, really good. And I did that again as an off time, right? Like I had my release in October, and I wanted to see how this would do and what it was really bringing in. And so it was just a test. So I didn't even tell anyone. Like it was kind of those quiet, like, let's just see what this does. But I actually got reviews. And the best part is I got people who bought because I did on like the second book. People who bought the second book through this, they went back and bought the first book. And so I advertised the second book, but when they went out there and realized it was the second in the series, they went and they purchased the first one. So I ended up getting double the purchases on that because they really wanted to read it. And that's how you know, like, you're getting someone who really, really wants to read it, is they're like, oh, well, I need to know what happens first. And they go back and they get the first one. So that's been really successful. And then I've had really good success using reader's favorite. And it's controversial, right? Where people, whether or not they like them or not, but you get the reviews. And then I entered the contest, and it's you get, mixed reviews sometimes, but if you get a 5-star or a 4-star and higher review from someone for this program, then they'll put you in what they call their book rotator that's on their main website, and they'll advertise for you for a number of months. And that consistently brings in 10 or 12 sales a week when I'm in that rotator. And as soon as that rotator ends, it drops off. Like I can see that immediate drop of a dozen books because people are seeing it and they're frequenting that site. And I actually was picked up by some libraries that were in other countries, sadly not my country, but other countries, because I was in their notice and their release. So that's one that mixed reviews, right? Like some people have had very bad experiences because they didn't get a good review back. And it's it can be kind of expensive if you enter the contest, right? Like the contest isn't really cheap. It's over $100. So there's mixed reviews on whether it's good or not. But I had really good experience with it, right? Because I happened to get a medal from it, and I happened to get high reviews from it. And so if you do get high reviews, it's an excellent experience. If you don't, it's a lot of money to not get anything in return. So it's something people have to balance with, and think about before they participate in doing it.
Well, and that's why I like some of the free things we can do as well, right? It's like you can be all over social media. You can be on TikTok, you can be on Facebook, all that stuff yourself for free. And then it's okay, what's my budget? So like you, I don't write full time. It would be great if I could, but I don't. So it's one where I have a day job, and luckily they let me do stuff after hours in my own time. They don't expect me to work for them 24 hours a day, which is kind of nice. So it's one where, my situation's a little bit different, but I want to get the work out so that people can appreciate it and all of that. So I, give myself a certain budget and all of that. And I'm actually, I went to a Comic-Con. I didn't go and have a table there, but I am going to go to the next one that they have in Greensboro, North Carolina. And it's like a couple $100 to sign up for a table back in the middle of nowhere. But I just had so much fun walking around the Comic-Con talking to the people. I'm like, this might work out. Who knows? If I sell 5 or 10 books, it's worth it.
Make your bookmarks in your business cards.
Yeah,
that's right.
For the ones that don't buy books, keep them in your mind.
Yeah,
or keep you in their mind.
One author I saw had dice that he'd had made. for like
Oh.
the D&D people. And I'm
Oh,
like,
geez.
oh, that's just cool. And he's like, I've sold more dice than I have books today.
Oh.
But he said, he's like, I paid 50 cents for the set of dice. And he goes, I'm selling them for $5. He goes, I'm making money. So he wasn't complaining.
At least he
That's
was
awesome.
covering the cost of his booth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So
Yeah,
so,
I think you made a good point because you said you're in a different spot and you can just be like, I just want to get my books out there. You're not trying to make a living. And I think that's really important to identify for new authors, right? Is really understanding what you want and reminding them to be kind to themselves, right? Because we tend to compare ourselves to that 1% that just take off. Those individuals who've had a career for 30 years and are always on the New York Times bestsellers. That is such a small pool of writers. And, you know, we're in an age where we have such a wonderful access to be able to get our artwork out there and to get our stuff out there. And we need to be kind that it's not going to be an overnight, you're going to sell 100,000 copies of your book, because even traditionally published, you know, really well-known authors don't necessarily sell that many copies of their books. They probably sell quite a few less than that. So, you know, it's important to know what you want when you go into it as a new author and what's important to you and most important to you. And it's important to be really good to yourself because it's so easy to beat yourself up and stop and just not be able to go forward because you don't feel like enough people want what you have to deliver. And the reality of it is you want what you had to deliver and somebody else out there is you. So even if it's just you and that one other person, they needed you. And you gave them what they needed and you have no idea what they were going through at the moment they picked up your book and what you maybe did for them. So be kind to yourself because you have no idea the impact you are having on maybe a dozen people and the ripple effect of that. And that's amazing. You wrote a book. You wrote a book.
The funny thing for me, I get a call one day from my brother going, such and such, who was one of his friends' wife, somehow found my book. And he goes, she's got some questions on the book. Can she text you? And I'm like, sure. And she's like, okay, was this person this and all this stuff? And I'm like, oh, that just made me feel so good.
That's excellent.
And so I text her anytime a new one's coming out. I'm like, this is just awesome, you know. So that kind of feedback is good. But you're exactly right. You have to be kind to yourself because it's one of the things that, you know, the way I look at it, what happens to me sometimes is I'll get fixated on the marketing. I'll get fixated on the Facebook, the Twitter, what have you. And then I'm like, okay, I haven't wrote a chapter in a month. I need to turn off things and get back to it. And the problem for me right now is I'm writing one that I really don't want to write. It's a serial killer novel. And I just don't like where my head goes in that book. So I'm like going, I just don't really want to write this paragraph. And then afterwards, I'm like, I need a shower, you know, and all that good fun stuff. So I'm like, it's like pulling teeth. So I'm like, I'm happy to focus on marketing for a little bit, but I'll get back to it. I promise myself. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about, you know, what influenced you to become a writer. Right. I mean, I think that would be that may help. And I'll start since I'm currently talking. So for me, I always wanted to be a writer when I was a little kid. That's why I got my first computer. And thankfully I did because computers are where I make my living. But it was one of those things, always wanted to be one. Wrote my first, you know, it was about a D&D character set. Of course, imagine that, fantasy role playing, right? You know, D&D is a nerd kid. Imagine that. So anyway, so that's what I wrote. I shared it with somebody. They read it, laughed at it, and I didn't pick up and start writing again for 25 years. And or actually longer than that. So during COVID, I was making a joke with my editor, who's my cousin. And I said, you know, I've always wanted to write a book and I just never had anybody who could clean it up because I can't really write English, you know? And she's like, I'll edit your book. I've done several so far. And so next thing you know, I'm writing a book and I'm 7 in, I think, as far as for not published yet, all of them, but I've got 4 published. So for me, that's sort of how I got started. But that very first person that laughed at it and read some of it out loud, the grammar, which was horrible. Yeah, I'll admit it. But it was like, I should have just brushed that one off and went on and kept writing. But so how did y'all get started? Who wants to go first?
Should I go first? I can go first.
Go ahead, do it.
So for me, I was about, I would say 6 or 7, and we had this school project where we were supposed to write a Christmas story. and we were going to take it to the nursing home and read to the elderly for Christmas. And so I came up with this story about this elf who was just really mad that they had to make presents for other people instead of him. And I wrote the little pictures and did the whole thing, and we took it over there. And I remember it was this group of all men. It was all these old men. And they were just laughing and, oh, she's so cute. And that's a great story. And, I'm sure I'm like 6 and cute. So of course, what else are they going to say? But I just remember that feeling like I connected with these people and I made them laugh and I made them feel good.
Awesome.
And I just got addicted to it from that moment on. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to make people feel things. I want to connect with them. And I just never stopped writing after that.
Great story. That's cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
To have such
me.
positive feedback at such a young age. I mean, no, that's really cool.
All right, since nobody volunteered, John, how did you get started?
I would say exactly that I have, like you or others, always wanted to be a writer from the earliest times that I can remember. So there wasn't an event that I wasn't a writer before then, and then I was a writer after then. Or after that, I would say if I could remember back as far as I can, that was always a goal of mine. So I knew that pretty early on, I figured out that I wouldn't be able to support myself doing that from day one. So I went and had and got an education that actually put me in a position to be able to do it full time, which I think was great. And my story is not going to be the same as anyone else's. So don't take my advice. I'll just say what worked for me. I spent a lot of years not writing to put myself in a position that I could write. But I do, and I've said this in author interviews, I do specifically remember writing a short story in the 2nd grade. So I was 7 or 8, whatever that time frame was. And it was science fiction, and it was called Stargate 9, and it was 4 pages, and it was wonderful. And I really wish I had a copy of that, because that's when I knew I could do that. And I did read a lot of science fiction. I was reading at a level way beyond the 2nd grade at that point. And to answer your meta question, a lot of my influences came from the science fiction genre. I could list a whole bunch of names. Interestingly enough, when I did get in position to write full time, I have not written a science fiction novel. I for whatever reason, chose Russian historical fiction.
I was going to ask, John, I'm like, where is it?
It's maybe coming. It's not going to be the second one. My second one doesn't really have a genre. It's probably going to be what they call literary fiction, which is sort of a catch-all if you don't have a subgenre, like mystery or horror or science fiction or romance or any of those types of things. Literary fiction is fine. It's more about the characters and their stories versus some kind of genre that drives the story. But yeah, no, I read and continue to read a lot of science fiction, but I have not yet written a novel length piece. I've written a lot of short stories, but the meta question is, always wanted to be a writer, always knew I was going to be a writer, and put myself in that position to be able to do that full time. And I feel very blessed and lucky to be in this position, because I don't know personally anyone else that is writing full time. I think all of you, unless I misheard something, all have jobs to be able to write in a part-time capacity. And I wish all of you could achieve your goal of being able to write in a full-time capacity, because time is the most valuable asset that we have. You can't buy it. You can't sell it. It's something that you have a limited amount of. And if you want to be a writer, you have to be able to use all of that, all the time. And unfortunately, life gets in the way of that for the majority of people. And I wish everyone that wanted to be able to write full time could write full time. And the people that can need to recognize that they are very lucky. And the people that have made it, maybe they, the Hugh Howeys and the Andy Weirs, that that 1% that was mentioned, that started out as sort of a self-publishing type of person, and then made it into the traditional selling millions and millions of copies. Those individuals are inspirational, because if it can happen for them, it can happen for any of us. So I count myself very lucky, but always knew from day one. If you had asked me when I was in kindergarten, I probably would have said writer. So I'm very blessed to be here.
That's awesome. All right, so continuing across the how you show up in Zoom, London Blue, how did you get started?
A lot like you guys. I always knew it was just something I always knew. I back in third or fourth grade, I remember reading a poem in one of our English textbooks about a purple cow, and to this day, I can quote it line for line, word for word. I memorized it. I still know it. I don't want to recite it because I don't know the author, so I don't want to get into copyright infringements. But I love that little poem so much. I started writing my own little rhymes, and I started writing poetry. And back in fifth and sixth grade, I would actually take one of my assignments and turn it into a poem and turn it into a poem as an assignment, which I did just a few years ago in college classes. And it worked just as well in my college classes as it did in elementary school. Teacher thought it was wonderful, very creative, and sent some of my work in for a competition, and I won and got a college scholarship to University of Charleston when I was in sixth grade.
Wow.
My brother was 6 years older than I was, so I was teasing him that I got to go to college before he did. But I've always had a passion to write. You had mentioned, John, about you wished you had that little story that you wrote back in the day when you were young. Actually, I'm lucky enough that I wrote one in seventh grade, and it was a horror story. It was called Mama's Beast. I wrote it out in black Sharpie, and we ran across it. I've got the torn out yellowed notebook paper written out in black Sharpie that I took and converted into a new story. And that story is actually in Mass Mayhem Maladies. So that was kind of cool. And my kids, came to my book launch party, and they spoke, and they were talking about how cool it was to be able to see how that story that I wrote when I was a young child, how it developed into the story that's in the book today. So that kind of a little bit of encouragement to them, I hope. Hang on to your dreams, because one day they'll come true. And also I did the same thing. There were many years that I did not write. Mm-hmm. I was a full-time mom with two young girls. So they took up all my time. So there were many years that I didn't write, or I'd scratch a few poems down here or there for the girls, and there is one book that I wished I could find. Is I had started back in when my girls were little, and I was actually going to church. I was teaching Sunday school and doing youth group and things like that. I didn't always write horror, and I didn't always drink wine. But I'd actually started writing little poems of prayers for my children, and somewhere down the line in the moves, I lost that little notebook that I was scratching those little poems down. And now that I've got a grandbaby, I'm desperately searching every nook and cranny of this house trying to find those notes. If not, I guess I'll just have to start all over and write one for her. But my influences, again, young age, the Purple Cow poem, Mary Shelley that wrote Frankenstein, always been a big influence for me, not just because she wrote a story in the horror genre, but because she was a female writer in a time when females weren't even supposed to know how to read and write. So she was breaking rules before rules were even acknowledged to be broken at that point by women. So to me, she wasn't just someone who wrote an amazing horror story, which is still alive and kicking today with all the remakes and rewrites, and but the influence that she had on just women finally stepping out and saying, look, I'm just as good as you are at this, and I'm going to be heard. So she's a huge influence for me on many levels for that reason. And then, of course, Edgar Allan Poe, because poetry is my first love, and the dark horror, twisty stuff. So obviously, I'm going to lean towards Poe. Telltale Heart's my favorite. Yeah, did I answer everything?
Nope, that was perfect. And,
Awesome.
and continuing across Zoom as we go here, Rochelle, what about you? How did you get started?
So I'm actually the minority, apparently. I started off as a reader. Avid reader all through my young years. And then I turned probably 11, 12, and I discovered fan fiction. And I discovered that, oh, all those things that, the creators I always thought got wrong and they should have done it this way. I can change it. I can fix it. And so I've been writing fan fiction for, God, how old am I? Like 15 years now. So I started off as a fan fiction writer, and that really helped develop a love of character-driven stories. Because I often found myself drawn to like the one-shots, the little pieces that kind of went deeper into the characters than, a show or maybe another series normally would do. So I found a deep love for character-driven stories. And, obviously, as I'm writing fan fiction, I'm improving my own craft and whatnot. But the other big influence came when I read Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. And it was kind of a light bulb moment for me where, okay, I want the character-driven stories that I keep finding and I keep loving in fan fiction, but I wanted my writing to look a little bit like hers stylistically. I wanted to put some poetry in the prose, but still kind of keep that character-driven roots.
It's awesome. Which
she does so well.
See that's something else that's very odd. As you said that you started out as a reader. Actually, one of my things is as a writer, which a lot of people find odd, is I hate to read. I absolutely despise reading. I hate to read. I hate to even read my own work. I get bored with it. I get sleepy when I'm reading. I'll push through a few here and there if I find them really interesting. But for the most part, I just hate to read.
Yeah, I didn't read a lot when I was a kid, and thankfully, I'll come back to D&D. If it wasn't for D&D books, I don't think I would have ever read a book before I was 18. And I did the same book report over and over every year in school. And I used my brother's book reports that they gave me. So as long as I didn't have the same teacher, it was okay. But then once I started reading, I couldn't stop, and I was reading everything I could get my hands on. And now it seems sometimes that I'm like going, okay, I'll give a book like 2 chapters, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done with this one. They didn't go the way I wanted them to go, something like that. But let's keep going on the getting started and go to Kay Thomas. Crystal, how did you get started in this wonderful world?
Very similar stories to everyone kind of together. My grandfather was actually an unpublished author. He had written a novel and he liked to write short stories. And I spent a lot of time with him as a kid. And he was a big, Hardy Boys fan. I have all the books in these bookshelves behind me that I got after he passed. And so, I had night terrors as a kid. And one of the things that he had done to help me cope with them was teach me how to journal them and how to write and spend time and shift the narrative of what I was dreaming. And so it became kind of, where you're writing stories about it and you're taking this really scary thing that happened and you're turning it into something good. And we did that for years, right? That persisted clear into my adulthood, where I was having trouble with that. And so I had started writing stories then because of that very young. And so I had written, to no one's surprise here who has seen my books or know what they're about. I had written a story in roughly around 2nd grade where it was a young girl who had moved into a house and there happened to be a boy in the neighborhood and they become really good friends and she finds out he's dead. Like the end of the book is, I know everyone's laughing, like I have a thing for ghosts. I'm sorry.
I'm right there with you.
Right? At the end of the story, he like asks her to stay with him. And like, that's how I end the story is like him asking, are you, will you stay? And I remember my teachers like freaking out and all taking them and showing like all the girl, like the women teachers taking and showing each other, not realizing I had written like paranormal romance before I even understood what romance was. And they were all like very fascinated by it. One of my biggest fans is my kindergarten teacher. I kid you not. She's an amazing woman. But I had this string of like similar repeating recurring nightmares when I was in high school and I was still journaling. And so I had written them down. And as I was revisiting them, trying to figure out what was triggering them, what was causing them so I could shut that off, I kind of went, well, this makes a really good story. And so I started writing a novel based off of that. And someone who I really thought, had a close relationship with and thought very highly of was just like, writing's not really, this isn't really your thing. Like, it's good, it's great, it's good for you, but you're never going to be successful at this. And I stopped journaling. I stopped writing. I never shared. I married my husband not very long after that, a few years after that, and never showed him anything that I wrote for, decade and a half, because I was like, I am never being judged by someone again. This is something I do personally. This is for my own emotional health. No one else wants to see this. And, the person was wrong. And
the person was wrong.
The person was wrong. And so it was definitely like, I started out being like, this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And then someone was just like, no, you're not. And I listened and I took a different route. So then use that route to then eventually get back to it. And it's been, a wonderful circle back to that. And my book titles are kind of funny and they're sort of humorous, but my first book that I had decided to name Time to Wake, like I was, there's a whole story behind it, but, I love it because when my grandfather had passed away, I got the only living copy of his manuscript of what he wrote. And I finally found the box of it. Like, I had packed it away very carefully to keep it safe. And I had pulled it out after I had published my book. And he had named his book, Caverns of Time. So I got really excited that like this person who was so much a part of my life and so much of why I had started writing had written this book and basically chosen a very similar book name, and had written a book that was, has a lot of the same key elements to what I write. And I found it was just a wonderful connection, and it kept me going, right? Like, it kept me spreading. Like, now I'm continuing to write, and it helped me get past that feeling of like imposter syndrome, right? And I am an avid reader, so I've read a ton. And one of those traditionally published, one of those books that I read when I was younger was actually Laurel K. Hamilton, who writes very steamy books. Okay, so no one by any means, if you love Laurel K. Hamilton, please do not pick up my books and think that you're getting anywhere near the same anything. But she was, again, right? She was that female author who basically helped birth the genre, and she had these kick-ass characters that were gun wielding and just amazing. And it was this small petite female who swore and was just and it was everything that I needed to hear when I was at the age when I picked it up to make me feel like I could be strong myself. And she was just this incredible author. And how she wrote first person for adults, which at the time, now you see more of that. At the time you didn't, right? First person was reserved for young adult books. And so it was just something that influenced a lot of what I did from a writing style. And she was one of the very first authors to bring, LGBTQIA plus type representation to mainstream. She was not considered an author in that environment. And yet she had this broad range of characters that she just dropped in like so seamlessly. And, I buy all of her books, even though I admittedly have not read quite a few of the last few because I get a little too shy getting to those scenes, and she writes them in a way that they're actually part of the plot. So you kind of can't actually skip them because they're not gratuitous. They have a purpose and it's really hard to skip, but I keep buying them, right? Like, I keep going back and I keep buying them to support this author because of what she represents to all of her genre, and what she did. And that's, I think, the goal we're all looking for, right? Is that person who, even if what you write isn't exactly what they were looking for in a story, they recognize what your story is doing for someone else, and they recognize your talents, and they support you anyway, and they love you anyway, right? Like, you want your diehard fan who loves everything that you do, and you want your support system of those fans who say, you know what, these first 10 books, they were what I needed, and this last 10 books has been what somebody else needs, and I love you for what you're producing and what you're creating, especially those of us who write in multiple genres, John. Like, you've got a whole slew of people who are going to be like, I'm going to be here to support you, even if what you write isn't the same thing as that first book.
That's terrific.
Because, we know what you're aiming for, and we know your worth, and we know that, the more that we support you, the more we help you get to the people who need you. And that's, that's the case. That's what you're looking for out there in your group, in your writing friends, in your hub that you're targeting out there.
Well said. Yep.
Awesome. All right, so appreciate that. The next topic I want to talk about is the editing process and also what you use to create your masterpieces, right? Let's go for that. And for me, I use Word and then I of course use Grammarly. I know there's other tools like that out there, but that helps me at least keep it some form of English so my editors can pick it up. And I've worked with other people before where they're more on the Google Docs side of the house. But what do you find works best for you all? And is anybody using something besides those two for doing this?
I'll go first because the answer is yes. I use Apache OpenOffice, and there's also Libre OpenOffice, and they had a schism a few years ago. They're all free, but it's software that you can use that emulates and can export to things like PDFs or Microsoft or something like that. It just happens to be free. It's used a lot in the academic environment where they don't often have the money to pay for the software you mentioned, although Google is free too now. I don't use Grammarly. I use ProWriting Aid. I bought a 2-year subscription, which is going to end here in a couple months, but I'm going to go ahead and renew. That's a nice online. You have to be online to use it. It's nice to pick up a whole bunch of things that you might miss, not just the typical spelling type things. Any software will do that, but it will look for sentence analysis and try and guide you into things, making it easier to read, things that aren't stilted or words you've used too many times or things that are hackneyed, things like that. It's great for. The only minus I would say on that is you can't import your entire manuscript. If you've got 100,000 words, you have to do it about 1,000 words at a time. So that can slow things down. I just want to say on the editing topic, I might be unique here. It took me a year just to edit my manuscript. It's 108,000 words, which is right about the medium size for a novel, I would say. But it was a very time-consuming process, and one that I will admit, I've said in author interviews, I almost gave up on the entire project.
Wow.
The editing just literally almost killed me. It was terrible. I would make 27 positive changes, but then I discover 3 that would just come out of thin air. Like, I don't know how these are still there. I probably read my own manuscript 100,000 times. I was still finding things towards the end. Beta readers would find things, and I don't know if gremlins were going in at night and changing things, because I'd have it locked down and I'd read it again and I'd find mistakes, and it was just really disheartening and soul crushing. And even with the best software and a bunch of beta readers and me looking at it every single day, I just was almost ready to give up, because I didn't want to be one of these folks that published something and then had to make 50,000 revisions after the fact. It's very easy to do that self-publishing. You can do that on Amazon. You can change your stuff as many times as you want, whenever you want. But I wanted it to be as close to perfect as I could make it on day one. So I was really paranoid and wanted to just lock everything down. And again, I'm not just talking about spelling mistakes. Those are very easy. Any software worth its salt will put a little red or blue line underneath the misspelled words. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things beyond that, sentences that are words that are used too many times, or using the wrong word. If you meant a reign of terror and you say ARIN, no software is going to pick that up. Like Microsoft Word, things like ProWriting Aid will pick that up. You meant REIGN, because that's a reign of time, not reign of terror, like it's physically raining. Things like that can trip you up. And that's why, for me, I had as many beta readers as I could find. Friends, family, anybody that said yes, anybody that said they wanted to read it, whether or not they finished it or gave any feedback, if they could pick out things that I missed, I was very happy for them to do that. So that's
that software you mentioned was
LibreOffice is
Apache's.
Apache. I use them both. That's just something I'm familiar with. I will say just one. I don't want to monopolize this time. I will say for me, I did my own typesetting. So getting everything perfect, what you want to see on the page, exactly right. I'm an expert now with Apache OpenOffice. Doesn't mean you can't do it in Word, doesn't mean you can't do it in Google. If I had to use those other tools, it would be a steep learning curve for me. Now that I got it perfectly set for what I'm used to, the next novel and the next things that I write are a lot easier because I'm very familiar with that software. So I would say pick something and stick with it, because everyone has their own little quirks and things, and they're not necessarily compatible with the next thing you use.
Excellent. Anybody else? What's everybody else do? Anything different, or all pretty much the same?
I also
yeah.
you for
Go ahead.
I'm very similar to you, David. I use, Word, and I use Grammarly. And then the only thing I do differently is with Word, I make sure that I have it read it out loud to make sure I'm not missing any words.
That's a
or
good
have
trick.
extra.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Because even if I read it out loud to myself, I'll still read it the way that I intended. Whereas if the computer does it, then it makes me see the stupid errors that I have.
Perfect. Yeah.
Somebody said, I think it might have been on the last episode, that they would take it to colleges and get the theater majors to read their work.
Nice.
I haven't done that yet, but I'm like going, that's a great idea. I might have to try it, because that would be kind of cool. Pay for pizza and have them read your manuscript.
Perfect. Yeah.
I'm kind of the same way. I like to. Well, I'm probably one of the ones that David was saying that is insistent on using Google Docs. I am insistent on using Google Docs. I write all of my drafts in Google Docs, and then I download it to Word, which is, yes, I make Word read it back to me. Google Docs picks up different mistakes. Word picks up different mistakes. And then I also use Grammarly. So I have 3 different programs checking it, but I like to download it back to Word so I can have it read it back to me. Like you were saying, because if I'm going to read it, there may be one word that I'm just blindly skipping over.
Yep, absolutely.
Where reading it back to me, listening to it, it's going to pick up that one that I just keep skipping over. So yes, that's a great tip. I found that very useful too. And of course, the editor. You gotta have that. Gotta hire a good editor. It's worth the money.
And I'll call on her this time because she kept getting overrun with shopping. You were going to say something.
Bad. I also use Pro Writing Aid. I use Pro Writing Aid, and then I also use the Google Docs. So whatever Pro Writing Aid doesn't seem to pick up, Google Docs seems to. I can't focus when I try to do the little read feature. I can't listen to audiobooks for the same reason. I tune out. But I will personally, when I do my line edits, I will read them out myself. And I've gotten quite a few errors that way. But Pro Writing Aid has definitely been helpful. It's caught a lot of things that I missed.
Yep.
On the audiobook on mine, one of the first one, one of the funniest things I caught was they got into their truck, drove down the street, and then got out of the Mustang. And I'm going, wait a second. I was like, and I'm listening to that, and I'm going, did I really hear him say that? And then I'm like, did I really write that? And so I had to go back, and I'd forgot that I'd switched the vehicle type and all this stuff in a later edit. But it was just too funny. I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, I hope nobody catches that other than me.
My gosh.
Let me go into Amazon and make the magical change.
Yep.
And here we are. So
I haven't tried this yet, but I'm trying it now. I had heard that, I think I saw somebody on another author on TikTok mentioned it. But for the ARC readers, they told their group of ARC readers, whoever finds the most errors or typos gets a free copy of a paperback book.
No, that's great. That's a great idea.
So that's genius. So I'm going to be trying that this time around too. So we'll see what happens if anybody even participates. But
Great idea.
and
Doesn't count if I've already read it though, does it?
Oh,
That's like cheating.
Right.
I'm like, me, pick me.
You and John get one.
oh yeah.
I might be the outlier on this one, just that I do have Pro Writing Aid, and I'm actually a supporter of Pro Writing Aid because I did pick it up after publishing my 2 books because I wanted to give it a shot because I've gone through a lot of editors. So and not gone through, but just I've added editors as I go through this process. So I have one individual who's the first person who usually reads the book. She's a doctorate in English and she's a professor, and she's very good at the structural feedback, right? So she'll give you the, hey, something's just missing here, or really this chapter like doesn't mean anything. Like you can get rid of it, or you could just make it part of the next chapter. Like not enough happens in the span of time. She's really good at that kind of feedback. And then I added an editor the next time through that was really good at line editing, because I'm actually not bad at editing. You know, John might disagree with that. John, I think, is going to be my next person to touch for proofreading. But as far as editing goes, I'm not bad at it. I'm pretty good at catching errors, but I'm not perfect at catching errors. And I'm not someone who'll be like, I'm going to wait till it's perfect. I'm like, it's like 90%, and that is 90% better than everyone else. So I'm a little less. I kind of got over my hang up, which is part of the good thing about this, because in my day job I'm not very good at that, and so this has been a very healthy growth for me to be like, you know what, there might be a typo and someone's going to find it, but 72 other people didn't, so I'm calling it good. So I actually do. I have two different editors that I pay. I do have Pro Writing Aid, and then I have a proofreader that I also had run a few things through where I'm like, the editor had me change this, but it was after they did their full edits. So can you just make sure that no one's missing anything, because we're all just rushing to read this one section to finalize it off. And she did a really good job there. So there was a lot with that, and it's very important, right? Like it's really, really important. And I will call out to Pro Writing Aid, because the one thing I will give that system that I now know and I'm very excited to use is that repetition of words.
Yep.
I will catch that in dialogue, because that's the only part of the books I care about. I will catch that in dialogue. I will not catch it in descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm proofing my own stuff, my dialogue very rarely repeats words. Like I am on my dialogue. I'm on making sure my characters sound different, and they all have, you can tell the difference. They have strong voices. I get into the descriptions. I'm like, yeah. There was a cup. There was another cup. There were cups. All the cups. Lots of cups. That is definitely my weak point, and it's also my weak editing point. And it apparently is also the weak point of every editor that I've ever, interacted with, where they don't necessarily catch it either, because if it's smooth enough, no one does catch it.
Yeah.
But you will, once your audio reader, your audiobook narrator reads it, then you'll be like, oh, I used that word 7 times in the last 5 minutes.
I used so way too many times. So I went to the store. So I did this. And I'm like, that's just bad.
That's when you discover it, right? That's when you realize it. And no one really minds it when they're reading, but when they hear it, it's a little bit different. And Pro Writing Aid will call that out. It will be like, hey, you've used this word this many times in these 2 paragraphs. So it's really great for, short, close together reuse of words. It's not perfect. You have to pay attention, because sometimes you need to repeat that word. Sometimes there isn't another option. But it is, for someone who editing is expensive. Mm-hmm. It's expensive if you have an editor. And if you can't do that, that is okay. You are no less of a writer than anyone else. So do your best. Get the help that you can, get the systems that are free. And if you can put a little bit money out for Pro Writing Aid, it's a really good tool that in some cases does better than a physical editor did for me. So a couple of physical editors did for me. So you have a lot of options out there, and there's no wrong way to go. Whichever one works within what you can do, you're going to find a way to make it work if you really want to get it out there.
Yeah, I'll try the Pro Writing Aid. For me, I tell everybody, my cousin is my editor, at least in my first 2 books of my series, and she's doing it because it's out of love for family members, and it's been perfect. And we have a great time doing it. And she's like, she is my muse and things like that. It's like she's like, would they really do this? And so it's been great. And then my next book, I got a different person as an editor. But what I tell everybody is, I want you to enjoy the story. If you can forgive me a couple spelling mistakes, a couple grammar things, if you can forgive a couple of those things and enjoy the story, then that's my main goal. Is I'm happy of that. And in fact, I had a dig one day when somebody said, "Oh, you published it yourself." I said, "Yeah, I'm an indie author. I publish things myself. That doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else if you like the story." And I'm like, I just don't like the digs like that. It'd be nice if we could all get big publishing contracts and things like that. And I was reading an article by the David Wong guy. I don't know if you've seen the movie John Dies in the End. It's a great scary movie. It's really good. The dialogue's great, and the books are good. The second book is Don't Open This Book. It's full of spiders, and it says, seriously, dude, it's full of spiders. So it's a great book, fun to read. But he thanks, he was able to do an indie movie is what he got to.
Oh, wow.
And so now he's able to be a full-time writer and all that good stuff. And he's like, thanks everybody who watched this movie. This was great. So for me, it's one of those things of, I just hope the work's out there and I hope people enjoy the story. The next topic I had for everyone was sort of audiobooks. So does everyone here have an audiobook? Does anybody not have an audiobook? What are your thoughts? Okay.
I don't. I know a lot of people do. I don't have one at the moment.
Yeah, myself, I enjoy the audiobook process. In fact, it helps my editing process. But what I'm doing is I'm using that company called ACX. So then Amazon gets a cut,
Right.
the ACX company gets a cut, and then depending on how you get your producer, you can either pay them or you can give them half of your cut.
Yeah.
So eventually you get down to you're only making a little bit per book. But the process is great, and as far as that goes, and I love hearing my work. The first time, because I listen to more books nowadays than I do read physical books. Listen to them while I'm driving down the road or when I'm going to sleep at night. I'm like, hey, play this. I'd say the device's name, but then it would start playing something, so I won't do that. But for those of you who have audiobooks, what was your experience like?
I have one. Does anyone else working on it right now?
I'm researching it.
Nice.
I've done a lot of
Here we
research.
go.
With it. It's fun.
Yeah. You go ahead. I've got a great story, but you go ahead.
So my first book is in an audio. I used ACX. I found a narrator that was really, really good. Unfortunately, she had some personal things that happened, so she won't be able to do the second book. And I found that out very recently, and I was absolutely devastated because she was great, like just great. Her quality was great. She was wonderful at getting the vision out of what I wanted for the book. So that's sad. It's very sad, but it was a good experience. I did the pay up front, and then I shared. I did both. So you can do pay up front or you can do shared. I'm on the wrong finger, but you can do pay up front or shared royalties, or you can do both. I did both, and I went for a narrator that actually had more experience. So that was one of the ways that I was able to get that person. And it's good, right? The experience is good. The platform is great. It's really easy. I did try out the exclusive, Amazon only for it because I was just testing it out, and they are the main holders. So the advice that I would give for anyone who's researching that right now, right, is if you have multiple books, you want them to be in the same voice. So you might have some option on that because you could probably switch between narrators with the way you write your book. You could probably pull that off with the second one. But usually it's the same voice, right, that you want to be doing it each time. And so, you want someone who is going to be able to commit. So up front, you want to make sure, hey, can you commit to these books and have that established? The other thing is ACX did recently change their tax paperwork and how they do it. So they don't give the 1099 to the audio narrator anymore. So if you do the shared royalties, you will be responsible for giving them a 1099 and getting a W-9 from them if you want to expense that.
Wow.
And deal with that, right? And so it's a lot of trust, right? Because they're giving you their social and all of that good jazz. So, that's a big deal. If you do, that's probably going to affect that royalty share opportunity, right? Where people are going to be able to do that. You only have to fill it out technically over $600. But remember, if you do the upfront, like I did, you're most likely going to pay more than $600 if you have an 80,000 or more words book. So you have to do a 1099 for that if you want to expense it. You don't have to expense it, but again, not talking about my day job, but technically speaking, you should be, and you should be giving everyone the appropriate tax documents. End of spiel. But that is something that you have to deal with, right? Is you are going to have a relationship with that person for 7 years if you do that royalty share, and you're going to be responsible for making sure that they get their tax documents and that you're doing that exchange every year. And so that's just a piece that I didn't realize going into it because that's not how they did it last year. So just be aware that might change how you do that. And then the other thing is I did do the exclusive distribution because you got more royalties, right? You got 40% of the royalties as opposed to 20% of the royalties, which meant I got 20 after I shared.
Exactly. Same here.
What I did find is most of the places that actually advertise for audiobooks won't do it if you're exclusive to Amazon. So like BookBub is one of the big advertising avenues, and they have launched their own audiobook platform. And so if you are exclusive to Amazon, you can't use their marketing service for your audiobook because they require it to be on their platform. So if you do ACX, if you plan to advertise, again, this is all about what you plan to do, what you want to do, how you plan to get your audience. If you plan to advertise, that wider distribution is something you want to consider based on where you want to advertise, because it's hard to find places to get audiobooks out. There aren't a lot of options out there that, really just target audiobook listeners. I found quite a few on TikTok, oddly enough. That's been a good place for that. But that's one of those things where Amazon does have the corner a little bit, the market on audiobooks, but there's a lot of places that are kind of starting to push back on that, and including like, BookBub and some of those bigger marketing places where they're realizing that this is a place that they can push back on that monopoly, because they have their own monopoly as it relates to marketing. And so, you're getting kind of stuck in the middle of that battle. But having an audiobook, there's nothing more glorious than that. Like, holding the book is one thing, hearing someone else say it out loud and hearing your characters, and you're just like, I wrote that.
Exactly.
I wrote it.
Exactly.
Because it's not your voice in your head anymore. It's somebody else's voice. It definitely feels really good. So if you get the opportunity to do it, even if you get the opportunity to coax some of your friends to just read certain chapters on platforms, beg them, because it feels good. It feels good to hear someone read your words and to hear where they put the emphasis, right, on some of the sentences and the characters and the dialogue and the descriptions, versus how you might put it inside your head. And it shows you your work in a whole different light. It's very fun. It's a good experience.
Yeah, and see, for me, a lot of what I do is I'm trying to give back. I mean, that's why we're having this thing today. So I appreciate everybody again being here. And so in the giving back, I listen to LibriVox all the time, where they play you can download the out of print, the books that are in public domain, and somebody just for fun read these books and uploaded them. And so I contacted them and said, hey, how would you like to have one of my books? I'm going to read it and I'll send it to you for free. And they're like, oh no, we only do these. And I'm okay, I'm out of there. And then Pseudopod was a podcast that I listened to all the time, where it had these short little horror stories. And I was like, hey, I've got this almost finished. Do you all want it? And they're like, oh, well, we have to produce the audio ourselves. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to give back to people that I've listened to stuff for free, but I wasn't able to. But it's for anybody getting started with Audible, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the tax things, because unfortunately I haven't made the $600 yet, but it's good to know that when I do that I at least got to send them part of it. And it may even change how I do the books. Instead of doing the profit share from going forward, might do something different, because that just it is an expense, but expenses can come off of your taxes. So depending on the situation, but you're exactly right. Hearing those words, and one of the scenes that Will Tulin did, he was reading it, and he sent me an email, after he finished reading that chapter for the first time. He goes, okay, that was creepy. And I'm like, yes, at least I got that. Yay, I did it. So any questions on it for anything? Or John, you didn't have an audio book yet.
I've got an interesting anecdote. I for whatever reason, this is crazy. And again, I didn't know any of you a year ago, and I feel blessed to know all of you now, and many, many other people. I chose Russian historical fiction as my genre, more so because the story had to be that. So I didn't choose the story. The story chose me. It's esoteric. I mean, I don't know too many other people that write Russian historical fiction. I don't know anyone, actually, personally. And I thought the audiobook was going to be a home run. Actually, I thought it was going to be a grand slam home run, because a former coworker of mine, somebody I used to work with, his wife works in that industry. That's all she does. All she does is read. She is a voice actor. She reads books for a living. She can do accents. She can do all sorts of other things. That's her full-time employment. So he said, hey, when you get ready to do your audiobook, come and find me. It gets even better. She's Russian. She speaks Russian. She can do the full Russian accent. And she's a woman, which, if you've read my book, the narrator has to be a woman. I'm not going to compromise on that, because that's the two of the major characters There are three, but two of the major characters are women, and that's just not something I'm willing to compromise on. It has to be a woman. And because I use some, not a lot, but I do use some transliterated words from Russian into English, I want to get the pronunciations right. I want to have the accent correct. And somebody that grew up in Russia, speaks Russian, and is an audio narrator for a living, I thought this was a grand slam. There's not going to be it can't get any better than this. Unfortunately, what I discovered is that this person's services, and they're right, it doesn't come cheap. I would have to sell a couple thousand copies of this audiobook just to break even. I don't think I'm going to sell a couple thousand copies of my book between electronic and print for a while. I'm getting there. I'm well on my way, but even that is going to take a few years. So putting that expense way up front to have something that's going to take a long time to recoup was not something I could do financially, even though this person was the perfect candidate for the job. So I'm heartened to hear your positive experiences with ACX, because I think that is likely the route I'm going to go through. I'll have to do the auditions, as you say. You can
the auditions are huge.
You can do the auditions. I want somebody. It's going to have to be a woman. You can, if you're an actor, you can either do a Russian accent or you can't. If they speak Russian, that's a plus. But I'm going to be. I've already set the bar pretty high for finding someone. But I think I will be able to do that. And doing the profit sharing where you can take half and they take half, or they get the half, or all of that can work itself out. But it won't mean that I'll have to spend several $1,000s up front to find someone. It might work for me a little bit better. But I was really crushed, because I thought this person was going to be the best, and they gave me the quote. And my wife and I had discussed. We said, if it's below this number, it's a go. If it's this number to this number, we're like, okay, we have a serious discussion. If it's over this number, that's a no-brainer, because we just can't do that at this point. And it was way over our top line. I'm like, okay, well, this just wasn't meant to be for this person. But that doesn't mean I have ruled out getting an audiobook. It just means I'm going to have to do some work to get some editions under my belt, find some kind of payment plan that works for all the parties involved, and then put it out there. But to somebody who already said this, it's just another avenue that you can exploit when it comes to getting your work out there. Some people only love to listen to audiobooks, and that's great. Some people do both. Some people will discover your work through audiobooks and then go and buy your other print stuff, or the reverse of that. It's just another avenue that you can get your work out there, and it's something that shouldn't be ignored. And I want to do it. And if you've done it, if you're on this call, or if you're listening to this, I'm going to pick your brain, because I want to learn from you and not make some of the mistakes that I probably would make just trying to figure it out for myself.
Yeah, the auditions are some of the most fun, but also the most important part. And you can pick by language and all that good fun stuff. Yep. And so that was interesting for me. And then basically you propose, here's the script I want them to read. Perfect. And the ones that got me were the ones that said, oh, I saw you had this script here, but here's a sample of what I've read before. And I'm like, if you're not even
right,
And then Will is the first one I actually paid. So the others I did pure profit sharing, but he sent back, he said, I only do this way, where it's the 50-50 type thing with a little bit of pay up front. And he said, I only work this way. He goes, but I love your book. He goes, I love the character. And he goes, and I think I would do a great job. And I'm like, somebody that's that passionate about it, I'm going to give him a leg up. And so I told him, okay, do the audition. And he did. And it came back. And I'm like, okay, that's, this is just perfect. So very happy with that. So I appreciate everybody being on here today. Other advice, I think, John, you just mentioned something that I think can help people, is the budget. A lot of times when you're getting started, especially me, I push the button to go live, and I'm like, yay, everybody's buying my book. And it's like, oh, wait, I have to do something. So then it's like, okay, marketing, Amazon, you're spending more than you thought you were going to for this. It's so set that budget, try to live up to that budget, and then do things to that are free, whatever it would be. And even, I think the other tool you mentioned besides, I mentioned Grammarly, but Pro Writing Aid, I think they actually have a free version as well. So
Yes.
you can do some free stuff with those different tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are some quick advice things. Is there anything else, quick advice things before we just go round robin, and we'll go in reverse this time? Is there any quick advice anybody has on
As far as trying to keep things in budget, which one of the things that I ran into with the children's book I was doing was illustrations. I'm not a great artist, so I'm a writer. I'm not a painter or a sketch artist or such. I mean, I do photography, which one of the pictures that I took is actually David and I used as the cover for The Last Call. So some budget-minded things you can do for your books is, one, take your own photos and convert them into covers or illustrations. In the Mass Mayhem, speaking of photos, I actually had asked a few specific people if anyone had pictures of certain images that I wanted to put in the books. Because Mass Mayhem is 7 poems or 7 poems that introduce 7 short stories, and I wanted to introduce each chapter with an image, and like this one was taken. This one was taken by a friend on Facebook, and he sent it to me. He didn't require any payment. He didn't ask for anything. The only thing was agreed to. Told him that I would put his name in the book as a photo contributor, and. The Mom is Beast. Actually, my youngest daughter's friend, little girlfriend, took this picture of her grandma's bedroom. So there's ways around it. You just have to be creative. There's ways around getting your work out there, getting the things that you want accompanying it. And on the children's book, I actually hired a 19-year-old young girl that lives in the area. And she did all the illustrations for me. And I think she did. That's the cover.
Yeah.
I think she did a really amazing job. And it is a children's book.
Yeah,
that's good.
This is just a sample that I had printed up for, because that children's book is based on the 5 living generations that we have in our family.
Okay.
And I wanted to get something in hand to give to my grandmother, my mom, my daughter, and one to put back for the grandbaby, but before it was actually published. So that's my sample. But being able to take her images and scan them in, and I used Corel Paint Shop to clean up the images, add backgrounds, or change the colors, or smooth the pencil marks. So as long as you're creative, and this was doing this, it's a win-win, because not only am I able to put out a cool book, but I'm also able to help promote young artists that's living around locally. So it's a win-win. I'm helping her get started. She's helping me get started, and I paid her X amount for each image that she created. And it was something that I could afford to pay. And it was something that she was willing to work for. So yeah, it's just be creative in what you're wanting to do, and don't be afraid to promote young people. If you need a picture, or send them out with a camera, or give them a pencil and a pad, and encourage them, and see if it's something that they produce that you can actually work with. And so promoting our youth and their talents, and getting their name out there as well as getting our own. It's always a bonus.
Awesome.
Well, I appreciate everybody being on here. Is there any other advice we have real quick before we go through the sign-offs of everybody? Awesome. Well, I appreciate it again. I'm sure we'll have another one. We'll invite everybody again if they want, and we'll see how else we can help people going down the road. So going in reverse order this time, Michelle, you get to go first if you'd like to sign off and mention your name, your books, and all that good fun stuff, and then we'll go around the bend.
Sure. So again, I'm Rochelle. I write under the name of R.Raeta, Raeta. My book Everlong is currently out, and my second book Ladybirds is coming out on April 1st.
Nice.
And then I'll Lost Boy Press anthology, which is releasing on March 31st.
Very cool.
Very cool.
All right. And Kay Thomas, Crystal.
And I'm Kay Thomas, and I have the first 2 books of my series out. The third coming soon. I'll be on SassCon's panel along with, I think, John, you're on there too, right?
Yeah.
For this year, talking about dialogue and how to make your voices heard. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So if you find me on Twitter, you can get the schedule of all of those things that are happening. And go get Rochelle's book. Really good. But that's my sign off advice is find some people in the writing community that you legitimately love their work. Don't go out to find somebody who you just think is a good platform to be an advertisement for you. Make solid connections with people, find people who you love their work, and you can really form a close relationship with, because some of the people on the screen right now taught me about the advertising and Canva, because she's being really gentle about it, but Rochelle also makes all of her own covers. And they're absolutely drop dead gorgeous. So if you are not an artist, as London Blue was saying, like, oh, if you're artistic, if you have no skill in that at all, you'll find somebody else in the community who does. So reach out. There's a lot of friendly faces out there.
Awesome. And London Blue.
Okay, again, I published Mass Mayhem Maladies and co-wrote The Last Call with David Musser. Both you can find on Amazon. Baby Jen, I'm hoping it's finished. It's just a matter of, do I want to wait for a publisher to pick it up, or do I want to just go ahead and throw it out there myself? And then the Tabar, that's coming very, very soon. My goal is to try to get it out by Easter, at least by the 1st of May at the latest. And you can find me on all social media under WV London Blue. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Yeah, I've started TikTok too. I'm struggling with that one, but I'm on there. I've posted a few things, and I've created a horror oddities group on Facebook called WV Mass Mayhem, which is really cool. There's over 500 members now, and they're very interactive, so that's a lot of fun. It's not just me posting stuff about my books. I mean, it's interactive. There's a lot of people involved in that, so it's a lot of fun. So yeah, WV London Blue, look me up.
All right, and John.
John St. Clair, here's a copy of my really great, I love this cover, Stalin's Door.
Awesome.
You can find it on Amazon. I'm mostly these days on Twitter, Saint. That's where I probably spend the majority of my time. I'm on all social media except for TikTok, but Twitter has the most bang for the buck, I think. And I want to specifically thank Casie, Chris, and Rochelle for taking a chance with my invitation to be here today. These are terrific panels, I think, and I really want to thank you all personally for being here. I hope you come to another one. There's no set schedule. I think it's just whenever David finds the time to do it, but I found them very rewarding, and to make that connection is rewarding for me. So thank you very much for taking a chance on that. And that's it.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Yeah.
And then Casie.
It's me. Okay. So my book, I'm going to pull John. I have it. The Drift.
Perfect.
is available on Amazon, and then the sequel, The Symbiosis, is going to be coming out later this year. Hopefully, no one will fall. We'll see what the betas say. That's the goal.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody. I'm David Musser. My latest book is called Living Death. It's the first one I actually did in first person. So it was very, very interesting writing in that versus the third person. So it was a learning experience, to say the least. Appreciate everybody being on here. We'll definitely do this again. As John said, there's no set schedule. I'm going to publish the audio on Spotify, and the video will be available on YouTube. So, make sure you share it, and then, feel free, if there's anything that you're promoting, don't hesitate to make sure to send it to me on Twitter. I'm very, very good about, republishing people's stuff on Twitter, because it's, everybody helps everybody else. So again, I appreciate it. Let's all wave goodbye. And then, yes, you're on mute there. Everybody's got their books. Awesome.
I'm like, hold up your books, hold up your books.
I know, I saw you. I was
Mine are right there.
Doing it.
Awesome. And we are